All right, hello, Gabriel Clevenger here again. So, welcome to this first video conversation about the table. Now, I'm sure you've heard of a lot of ministries or churches that have some sort of nondescript generic name, and you hear the name and you think, well, what does that even mean? Well, this is not that, okay, I promise. The name of what we are doing comes specifically from an interaction that Jesus had with a couple of people. We read this passage in Luke chapter 24. Now, let me set the stage for you just a little bit. This is the afternoon of Resurrection Day. This has been some kind of whirlwind for all the people that have been following Jesus, and even for just casual observers. We get from this text that these two, Cleopas and another, I'm going to argue that this is Cleopas' wife. I'll say why here in just a minute. But these two were walking from Jerusalem to a town called Emmaus. Now, our best estimate from what we read in the gospel is that this was about a 7-mile trip. So Luke tells us that they were talking about the things that they had just heard about Jesus risen from the dead. Now, the resurrected Jesus walks up beside them and asks them what they're talking about. They're wondering how anyone could be talking about anything else, frankly. And they say, we're talking about Jesus of Nazareth. We had thought he was the Messiah, but they killed him. But now we just heard that he came back from the dead, and we don't know exactly what to think anymore. Now, Luke wants us to have a couple of questions here, okay? Chiefly, if these two had followed Jesus around and heard him speak, Luke had been telling us about the followers of Jesus just before this, and transitions here to tell us that two of his followers, that's who we're talking about for this very story. So these are not just people who knew of Jesus. They had seen him, heard his voice, followed him around. So Luke tells us they were prevented from recognizing him. How odd. Now, whatever the case, now Jesus spends the rest of the trip unpacking for them, beginning with Moses and the prophets, Luke tells us, all the things about himself, the Messiah. So we figure whatever was going on, when Jesus spends that much time explaining to them, just them, right now, the things about himself, surely they will see him for who he is. But curiously, they don't. Now, Luke's point is for every reader to squirm as they read this. This doesn't feel right. Something is off here. Luke is setting us up to see what happened with Jesus and these two. Well, they get to Emmaus, and as good welcoming Jews, they invite Jesus in to eat with them. Their eyes are still prevented from seeing him after all that time together and conversation. The tension is thick for us reading this. Why can't they see? When they sit down, Jesus takes his place as the one distributing the food. He takes, blesses, breaks, and gives the bread to them. And here, finally, Luke tells us that their eyes were opened. Now, Luke words this so that we hear something else in these words too. Here in Luke 24, verse 31, we have the same words used as another famous scenario with eyes and even food involved as well. Luke words this so that we hear Genesis 3, verse 7 here. That is where we read of Adam and Eve taking and eating something, and their vision being changed also. The difference here, though, is that in Genesis, their eyes were open to sin, death, shame, and brokenness. But here with Jesus, now you see these parallels. And why I believe this was Cleopas and his wife, their eyes are opened to forgiveness, life, hope, and resurrection. The person of Jesus, the breaking of the curse of sin. Now, if we think about this, it would bother someone. Why couldn't the resurrected Jesus walking with these folks break through to them? Well, he did. But the healing was done at the table. Luke shows Jesus sharing a table with people all through the whole account of his gospel. Pharisees, tax collectors, bickering siblings. Jesus tells the parable of the prodigal son in Luke and says that the father celebrates by hosting a feast. Jesus provides a meal in the desert for people who don't have anything. Jesus is so famous for sitting down at tables with people in Luke. Some of his critics actually called him an overeater and a drunk. And the Last Supper is, of course, famously around a table. This is the culmination in the way Jesus chose to do it. You see, no matter how right or appealing the information, Jesus chose to effect transformation by sitting down at table with people. The physical act of sharing a meal, if it's not just physical, just like the fruit in Genesis and the bread here in Luke, physical things have spiritual effects. Oh, the information is not lost. Luke tells us that they said to one another after their eyes were opened that the information Jesus had given them had been burning in their hearts. But the table was the missing piece. We want to give people of the upstate this experience. Yes, the right information is important, and I'll make sure that we do that. But there is something that happens when you receive from the Lord in this tangible, bodily way that is the missing piece for all those other pieces. That is what we want to get at. That's why we are a church called the Table. Now, I'm not saying we will just get together for supper every week, but this understanding of how Jesus and the earliest Christians centered tables is the base for our constant metaphor and why we do what we do as a church. Now, you may be saying, oh great, another church. Well, you know what? I don't blame you. That's a very natural response. But in our next conversation, I'll point out why this time it's different. God bless you. I'll see you again soon.